Tropical Depression 9 in the west central Gulf of Mexico, based on the satellite loops, in my never to be humble opinion. It looks like it's getting better organized, and we're going to be talking about that as it moves westward. And of course, we're also going to talk about Tropical Storm Franklin in the east central Caribbean, meandering away and spreading moisture all over the place. We've got tropical storm warnings up for the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and also we have tropical storm warnings up for parts of the Texas coast. So we will cover it all, look at the long range, and back tonight from Cellophane, that annual gathering of astronomers stargazing in plastic wrap. Joe Rayo is here with us tonight. And where else would he be on a Monday night at 7:35, but right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which, of course, as we all know, is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area with mulch, topsoil, sand, and come this winter salt. And with hurricane season getting into full gear, think about what you might need just in case we see a tropical storm or hurricane in the Northeast in the next couple of months. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is.
Is it omnitruevalue.com still, Joe?
It is. It hasn't changed. And Tempest by WeatherFlow. You can get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you decide to purchase the Tempest weather station or any of the other wonderful weather merchandise that they have, including smart weather fashion, use the coupon code use the coupon code I want a weather station. That was the old coupon code. The new one's I want a weather station. And if you do, tell them what they get, Joe.
They're going to get 10 big % off anything that you buy at Tempest. So go out there and buy whatever you want and get that big 10% off, Joe.
So it's Cellophane, but I thought I'd have a little fun with you because we missed you on our show last night, which I soloed for 55 and a half minutes. By the way, due to a number of requests, we are going to move the Sunday show to 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time, rather than do it at 11 a.m. So we will do it. That'll be a permanent move beginning this Sunday, I think. I haven't decided yet whether we'll take it Sunday off or not, but beginning this Sunday.
I'll be sitting maybe on Sunday at 11 a.m. with my coffee, which I don't drink. I usually have tea, all by myself, waiting for nobody.
That's correct. So Sunday, 7:35 p.m. Okay, that's going to be the new deal. All right. So by the way, how did everything go? Okay with Cellophane?
Well, it started off a little wet, and it's.
Well, you were in Vermont in a summer like this. It was bound to start wet.
I mean, Friday morning up here in Putnam Valley at around, I think it was like 5 a.m., we had some booming thunderstorms. So those same storms shifted rapidly eastward and hit Vermont around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday. And they picked up at least, Joe, this is my own, estimate or guesstimate based upon rainfall totals in and around Springfield, Vermont, where the Cellophane was held, at least 3/4 of an inch, maybe even more. But thankfully, all of that was over with, and the sun actually came out for the afternoon. Friday night was halfway decent. We saw lots of clear skies and stars for a good part of the evening. Saturday turned out to be a rather cloudy-ish day, a cool day with temperatures in the 60s and a gusty breeze. Couple of spritzes and sprinkles, but by late evening on Saturday, the skies cleared again, and once again, those who brought their telescopes, their binoculars, their cameras had good viewing of the nighttime skies, and on Saturday night for much of the night, all the way on until at least 3 in the morning. So if you could have put up with a little bit of the cool weather and cloudy weather during the day, damp conditions, and again, kind of a cloud burst first thing on Friday morning, If you could put up with all of that, the final reward was nice skies to see the stars, and that's exactly what was in evidence both Friday and Saturday night.
Good. I thought I was thinking about that over the weekend. I thought, you know what? It's an upper trough that's going to be up there, which probably means they'll clear out at night. So I'm glad. I'm glad everything worked out. Do you have enough Saran wrap for everybody?
Well, Renata and I stayed at a place called the Hartness House, but there were a lot of people who did
The Heartless House? Did you say Heartless?
Hartness.
Oh, Hartness. I'm sorry.
A gentleman who actually did something very unusual back in the early 20th century. He didn't like to go outside on frigid winter nights to look through his telescope, so he actually built a tunnel underneath his home, leading it to his observatory, which was several hundred feet away. And so he could actually, at the end of the tunnel, walk up and into the observatory. And all of this was underground, so he didn't have to be subjected to those cold winter winds of yesteryear up in Vermont. Instead, he was able to use, and the house itself has now been made into kind of it's not a bed and breakfast, but it's a place where you can bed down, and they have continental breakfast down in the lobby in the mornings. And the only thing I didn't like was the TV.
Tell me it had a manual dial.
No, it didn't have a manual dial. It was one of those not so smart TVs,
Oh, okay.
and it was connected to something called Roku.
Oh, yeah, Roku, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, Joe, that's something that's been around for a while, but
I was
yeah.
unable to find. I wanted to watch the Met game, or at least catch an inning or two before I hit the sack. And I found out Roku, they call it free TV.
Right.
Joe, like 4,000 channels. I mean, I could have watched the weather in San Diego,
Yeah.
broadcast coming from Omaha, Nebraska on Roku. And I'm flicking around channel 461, channel 597, channel 1334. I said, where the heck is SNY on this stupid thing? Uh,
It's probably a pay channel.
it's progress. Well, yeah, maybe it was. Maybe I
Yeah.
couldn't. But
Freevee
even
is
if it wasn't, even if it was available, where would I have found, what I was looking for?
yeah, Freevee's like that. You can find all the television stations from all around the country.
I
Oh,
found
oh,
Bob Ross. The
you
Bob Ross.
oh, you did find Bob Ross. Well,
I loved
that's
it.
soothing.
Yeah.
Too bad they didn't call it the Heartless House. You go in, you say, "May I have a room?" And they ask, they may I have a room? I really need sleep. And their response is, "You can go ahead and sleep on the floor."
Let me tell you one thing before we get into the weather. And I found this to be rather ridiculous. And actually, a couple of the other people who were staying there found the same thing. You go to the Hartness House. Of course, you've reserved a room there. You go there. The door is locked. The front door is locked.
Right.
But on the front door, there are envelopes.
Yes, I've been to bed and breakfast like that.
Okay, so there are envelopes. You pull your envelope off, and you open it up, and you read it. It says, "Welcome to the Hartness House, Joe. Blah, 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 blah. Here is your secret code. Use this code to enter the house and to enter your room." And mine was, it doesn't really matter now because it's not valid anymore, 1084, and then you hit the check mark on the door. So, and sure enough, there's a keypad on the door. So I go 1084, check. The door opens up, and I'm now suddenly in the Hartness House. There's no front desk.
Yeah.
There's nobody there to see me through all of this. I'm now in the house. I walk up the stairs. I had room number 2. There was the keypad again, 1084, check, boom, and in I am, my room. Now, my question is, suppose you don't have a room at the Hartness House. Suppose you're looking for a place to stay, and you're looking around, and you come to the Hartness House, and you say, "Oh, look at all these names. Hey, I'll pull off Joe," like that.
Yeah, the chances are something like that set up in the Bronx wouldn't exactly work because the outcome would be what you're describing. But it is Vermont. I remember I remember many years ago driving up to Vermont, and people would be selling eggs and other things, and they had it out at there was nobody there. The stand would be out in the front of their property. The house might even be, back a ways, and there was a box, and they just said, okay, dozen eggs cost whatever it was, $3 or $4. I just put the $4 in the box. And yeah, we have that even here and here too. You can drive around and people, have these, they rely on the honesty of of the people here. When most of the people that live here are honest people. So yeah, it's a different world, Joe. It's a different world.
Yeah. Yeah.
They probably still sleep with their doors unlocked.
It's possible. It's a different world up there. It's
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Anyhow, okay, so let's roll along. We shall start tonight with Tropical Depression Nayan. And, by the way, everybody think back to about a week ago, those of you who were wondering, when are the tropics going to get going? When are the tropics going to get going? And Hurricane Hillary in the Pacific is the last one for a while because the Pacific is shutting down. The Eastern Pacific is, and that's all that had to happen because once the atmosphere started rearranging itself with the shutdown of the Pacific, the Atlantic came alive, and all of a sudden you had Emily, you had Franklin, you had Gert. And frankly, Emily and Gert were pretty poor excuses for tropical storms, in my opinion. But no matter, they did what they did. And now we may have Harold before the night is out here in the West Central Gulf. Because I'm noticing on this visible loop, Joe, that the center is actually pretty well defined now. And you can see from the cloud tops on this loop that there's some bursting going on near where I think the center is. So I wouldn't be surprised if this winds up being upgraded to a tropical storm on the next advisory.
It's possible.
It is.
Yes.
And this is going to be just basically, it's not going to have time. It's moving at that's the one thing with these storms in the Western Gulf when they form like this, when they're moving at about 20 miles an hour going straight west. This is not going to have enough time to get much beyond minimal tropical storm strength. But I want to be a little cautious because we've seen instances in the past 3 or 4 years of tropical storms. I'm thinking of Imelda back a few years ago that went into southeast Texas around Houston. And I remember they had to upgrade that to a tropical storm after the center moved inland because all of a sudden there were 60-knot winds going on along the coast. And, of course, that wound up being a storm where the name was retired because it produced 50 inches of rain in southeast Texas just a couple of years after Hurricane Harvey. So, the shelf water there in the Gulf of Mexico is pretty warm. It's up around 90. And the conditions are favorable for strengthening. So, this might pick up at the last minute before it goes inland.
So these slow movers, they may not have, let's say, associated with much wind with them or damaging winds with them, but they still are tropical systems. And so if you have one that's moving exceedingly slowly or even parks itself nearby to you for more than a day or two, that is going to cause a lot of problems in terms of flooding rain conditions. And 50 inches of rain, Joe.
Yeah, well, this one's moving along, so it's not going to get stuck in there when it gets in. It's just going to go straight west into the.
It's progressive.
Yeah, so right, so it's just going to move along. So they'll get what they get, and then done. And I guess in some ways too, for those areas in Texas that it's going to impact, which have been seeing 100-degree highs day after day, the rain will give them a break from that at least.
Yes. Indeed.
Yes.
And you use a little bit of rain to, cool you off.
And,
not the best way to get cooled off because I'm sure the dew points will go flying upward, but, the beggars can't be choosers.
No, and the rain bands actually, the western part of this, the rain bands are just about on the coast. David Schwartz. The next advisory is out now, so 7 p.m. CDT, 8 o'clock. I mean the 11 o'clock one. I don't know if they have another recon schedule because there's none there right now. But we do see the rain bands now on the radar, starting to come ashore in the coastal bend of Texas. Corpus Christi is just to the southwest edge of that rain band, and the rain aloft at least is showing up to the northeast from Port Aransas up to about Port O'Connor, and actually some of the northernmost part of it is not too far away from Galveston. But the bulk of this is going to be in the southern part of Texas, and then moving northwestward, pretty much following the Texas-Mexico border all the way up into West Texas as a dying tropical system. And the Hurricane Center, as of 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, at 25.4 north, 92.4 west. So it's got maybe another 275, 300 miles of water to cross before it hits land. And moving at west at 18 miles an hour, so just do a round number, do 20. We're talking about it making landfall in about 30 hours or so, or maybe less. And you see the Hurricane Center does strengthen it to a tropical storm overnight when it gets to about 95 west. And then, of course, once it goes inland, it starts to weaken. Tropical storm warnings from the mouth of the Rio Grande River, which is right on the Texas-Mexico border along the Gulf Coast, all the way up to Port O'Connor. And watches extend from Port O'Connor northeast to Sargent, Texas. So this will come and go relatively quickly, and hopefully no big surprises when it makes landfall. Meanwhile, in the east central Caribbean, we have Tropical Storm Franklin, which was upgraded yesterday, and there's a lot of moisture here. This is a fairly loaded system, but you could kind of see the shear that's going on. There is some shear. You see some of the high clouds that are being blown off to the northeast. So it's probably enough to keep this system from strengthening much, although the water temperatures off the south coast of the Dominican Republic are pretty warm. They're well up into the 80s. So it's always possible that this could do at least a little bit of strengthening before it makes landfall. And by the way, most of the convection seems to be to the east of the center. So it looks like Puerto Rico is going to get into some heavy rains, as will the Dominican Republic. For now, Haiti, which is under a tropical storm warning, the south coast of Haiti, it's going to be interesting to see how far west the rain bands get. But whoever gets into those rain bands, and this one is going to move slowly, so this will be could be a prolific rain producer for those islands.
The discussion out of the National Hurricane Center, the forecaster, and I forgot who it was, that I'm merely guessing as to the exact position of where Franklin happens to be and its movement or direction. It's more or less idle in neutral gear for the moment. But what is interesting about Franklin, and you mentioned about the warm tropical waters that it will be moving over during the next few days, this is one of those storms where it slowly, and I want to underscore that word, slowly intensifies. And by the final date, or by the final time frame of the projection of movement, this thing goes from tropical storm to hurricane. The last position has it at better than 75 miles per hour, or at least 75 miles per hour hurricane strength. So this isn't going to go away very quickly, regardless of which way it goes. The anticipation is that over the next 5 days, it will be intensifying, and it will be reaching its peak. Well, maybe it might not be the peak because it may get stronger even beyond 5 days, but it's going to be, the projection is that it will be near or at hurricane force 5 days from now.
A lot is going to depend on what happens when it goes, because the center is going to cross the Dominican Republic, which is very mountainous, and it's likely to get distorted and then come out the other side. So what exactly comes out the other side remains to be seen. The Dominican Republic's mountains have in the past ripped apart tropical systems, some more than others, depending on just exactly where it tracks. But how it comes out on the other side, if it comes out as a much weaker system, then you have to wonder, okay, is that Hurricane Center forecast track too far to the right, and that you might take something more that goes more to the left or more west over time. So that's a variable that's in there. And the other thing is, if you look on this loop to the northeast of the Leeward Islands, you can see the spinning low-level center of Tropical Storm Gert, okay, which is sitting out there, and it's being impacted by the strong shear from the outflow of Franklin. But now I'm noticing, Joe, in the last few frames of the loop around where the center is of Gert, which was just about devoid of any thunderstorm activity, that there's been a sudden burst of convection there. You see that big white blob that suddenly forms right over where the circulation center is. So, I mean, this thing looked like it was falling apart. Frankly, I was quite surprised that they even made it a tropical storm, but I guess, whatever their criteria is, it checked the right boxes or enough boxes. They may, if this convection persists, that's right near the center, that may prolong it, but that tropical storm's going nowhere because you've got Franklin so close by, and Franklin is the dominating circulation here.
Right. And on the chat board, I see here somebody reminded me of this. Let me just make sure. I want to make sure I get the right person here. I think it was Carol DeChera. Yeah, Carol mentioned about the Saharan dust clearing, and that's why the tropical activity is getting busy now. Now, one of the things that I saw on Roku, or is it Roku? Roku. I did stumble across on like channel 4,937. I was watching
the Saharan Dust channel?
No, well, this was a station, I think, in Palm Beach or Miami or whatever, and whoever was doing the weather, the forecasting, was indicating the position of a broad area of Saharan dust, which apparently crossed through the Atlantic and was now impacting Florida. That this dust cloud was over Florida, but on the Futurecast, I didn't even know they had Futurecast for Sahara dust, but apparently they did down there. It shows you that this huge cloud of Saharan dust would move over Florida, and then early this week it would move off to the west and dissipate and open the doors for a much clearer atmosphere over the Caribbean and the Atlantic, and presumably the Sahara dust was working against tropical activity developing, but now with the dust clearing away, as Carol points out, that means that maybe we'll see more in the way of tropical development in the days and weeks to come.
Well, that makes sense. I think the most important factor through all of what's happened across the Atlantic the last 4 or 5 days is the fact that the Pacific is shut down. When the upper air in the Pacific Eastern Pacific is unfavorable for tropical cyclone formation, it usually means that the Atlantic gets going, because the amount of shear that's over most of the Atlantic is reduced when the Pacific starts to become more hostile. All the shear goes over there, essentially. The Franklin forecast from 5 p.m., when they send out these intermediate advisories, I don't know if most people are aware, the forecasts for the positions that the Hurricane Center gives, unless it's a special advisory for one reason or another, is only updated. They do update it at 5 a.m., 5 p.m., 11 a.m., 11 p.m. So when they send the intermediate advisory out, they don't put out a new forecast track. So this is from the 5 p.m. advisory, the forecast track is, and you see they have it turning northward. The tropical storm warnings for the south coast of Dominican Republic and Haiti, and the tropical storm watch for the north coast. And we also have tropical storm watches up for Turks and Caicos Islands. We do not have any watches up or warnings for Puerto Rico, just to make that clear. This is strictly confined to the Dominican Republic, nor do we have, and Haiti, and we do not have any watches or warnings up for eastern Cuba. So making landfall sometime on Wednesday, probably early in the day, and then coming out the other side sometime Wednesday evening. And again, what exactly comes out on the other side is going to determine is going to be a big player in the future track. Because if it comes out weaker, it may respond more to the low-level flow, which is a bit more westerly, as opposed to the upper-level flow, which is a bit more southerly to southwesterly. So in other words, the upper flow, if it's a stronger storm, it's going to move with those upper winds and go more to the northeast. If it's a weaker system, it may move with the low level flow and it may move more to the northwest or north. So this is something that is going to be, I think, important when it comes to the forecast. And we do have, I think there's a reconnaissance aircraft there now. We don't have a plane in the system in the Tropical Depression 9 in the Gulf of Mexico. But the plane is here in Franklin, 1,004 millibars, so that's up a couple of millibars from last night and earlier today. I'm seeing some, the light green is 40 to 45 knots. The yellows are 45 to 50 knots. There were a couple of reds in there yesterday when it was in the development stage, but and oranges, but we don't see that right now. So it hasn't really strengthened much, if at all, to this afternoon and this evening. And the plane again, I guess they show a little bit of movement, but that's very little in those two fixes. So we'll see. I'll be curious to see what they do with this at 11 o'clock tonight. But as far as rainfall goes, I think we should just check to see what the Hurricane Center is doing with rain in this case, and in the case of the depression. So they have the dark green is 2 to 4 inches. So again, because of the fact that this is moving, it probably won't have time to exceed that. The light green is 1 to 2, so Corpus Christi's in the 2 to 4. Brownsville is far enough south where it's just outside the 1 to 2, and there are a couple of small patches there. One between Laredo and Corpus Christi where they've got a 4 to 6, and then you get into Mexico. In north central Mexico, we've got a couple of patches there of 4 to 6 and 6 to 10. Very small patches, probably some mountain effect going on with that. And on the other system, which is Franklin, we'll see the range that are they doing a potential rainfall? All right, so they don't do the Dominican Republic apparently, but they are doing Puerto Rico. So they've got 2 to 4 inches covering much of southern and eastern Puerto Rico and some of the islands to the east. The light green is 1 to 2 for the northwestern part of Puerto Rico. So they're not really going crazy here with the rainfall for Puerto Rico. Joe, I think it's probably more for the Dominican Republic. We've seen storms over the years that have produced 20 or 30 inches of rain over there, almost in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm thinking way back now, 44 years, to Hurricanes David and Frederick. And both of those storms took they were not exactly identical, but both of them took fairly much the same kind of track over the Dominican Republic, over Hispaniola. And these were two very potent storms which got torn to shreds, and very quickly, once they moved back out over the water, pretty much put themselves together into very devastating storms, especially Frederick when it hit the Gulf Coast.
Yes.
So with this particular system that we're watching now, it's not anywhere near the strength of David and Frederick. So it might get ripped too, or to a degree, but it's also, I think, moving a bit faster than David and Frederick did, and so as a result, more progressive, faster. At least when it makes interaction with Hispaniola, it's not moving very much now at all. But when it starts speeding up and goes across the Dominican Republic, it'll get ripped apart. But then it will put itself again back together, and that's mainly why the anticipation is that as it puts itself back together slowly but surely, that it will eventually make it up to hurricane strength in about 5 days.
Now the upper air showing both these systems. Here's Tropical Depression 9, and it's right underneath the southern portion of this huge upper high that is sitting over the middle Mississippi and Missouri River Valley, and therefore, it's got it can't go anywhere but west or west northwest underneath the base of that ridge, and the ridge is strong enough that this is moving at 18 miles per hour. It's a little slower than what it was moving earlier, but it is moving right along. But Franklin, on the other hand, there's an upper low that's sitting southeast of Bermuda. And, that's probably creating some westerly winds aloft, which is the reason why we've got the shear. With this, Joe, I think the outcome of the track is a little less clear. The upper low is forecast to weaken and move northeastward. And then that's because it's actually being absorbed by a strong, deep trough off the east coast. And this is what Franklin is going to respond to by moving northward or northeastward toward that trough. But then the trough pulls out. And once it pulls out far enough to the north, a little skinny upper high, you got the ridge in the west pulls westward down into Oklahoma and Texas. And, here's the base of the upper trough in the north with westerly winds from Virginia northward. And you sort of have a very weak ridge here in between. And this is why, if you look at the way the long range has been handling Franklin, actually turns it northwestward and kind of pointing toward the Carolinas, and then winds up turning northward somewhere between North Carolina and Bermuda. And you see how it tracks there. It goes west of Bermuda and east of North Carolina. The GFS is probably the furthest east of all the models. The European was further west, but you get the idea here. Well, again, I'll be curious to see what comes out on the other side. If it's a less potent system, it might have, it may miss the trough to the north sooner, so that northeast motion never really gets going in a big way. And you wind up having a system that's further west that's going to respond to the upper air features that'll be along the eastern seaboard over the weekend and into early next week. There's weak troughing that's coming down. Here's a strong trough. Here's the first trough right here. This is the first one. And, that's for this coming Wednesday. So there's the first trough that comes out. That lifts out. And then you've got a second one right behind it for Saturday afternoon that moves into the northeast. And most of it pulls out, Joe, but there's like a little piece that gets left somewhere right along the coast, and that would be enough to turn it north and then northeast, where it passes east of Cape Cod and then heads to just south of Nova Scotia and toward Newfoundland from the southwest, if you believe this.
Well, yeah, if you want to believe it, or is it, Joe, a science fantasy?
No, I mean, it's got to do something. It can't just sit there and die. It's going to, the models do strengthen it to a hurricane. I just wondered if somehow this trough lifts out faster and doesn't leave much behind, because you do have another trough right behind it, a weaker trough, a weaker piece here that, right now would suggest that it would get pulled out to sea. But what if that weaker piece is a little slower and a little bit to the left, comes down and dives a little bit further to the left? That could potentially pull that a little bit closer to the coastline. So I wouldn't go much beyond that in terms of speculating, but I could see how there's a possibility of something like that happening.
Well, the only thing that if that happens, and I'm sure even if it doesn't come closer, the Weather Service offices across much of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast are going to be issuing rough sea or swell advisories for the fact that Franklin will be churning up the seas quite a bit. It doesn't have to come or make a direct hit on land. It could stay several hundred miles or more offshore and still act like a gigantic atmospheric egg beater, if you will, and churn those waters and make things rather unsafe. So for those of you who are thinking, let's say for this upcoming weekend, hey, we're going to go to the beach. And you may go to the beach, but there's a chance right now that you may see a lot of red flags because of the rough sea conditions that are being churned up by Franklin.
Meanwhile, across the U.S., we've got a cold front that's moving through the northeast that doesn't have much with it. I noticed today, by the way, Joe, that the high temperatures actually, there were not that many places that got to 90 degrees today. Upper 80s was much more common than 90, and I saw maybe one or two spots in New Jersey that got to 91, low 90s in southernmost Pennsylvania down into Maryland and Delaware. But we're getting to the time of year where it's getting to 90 degrees is tougher and tougher to do unless you have the upper air set up the right way unless you have some kind of ridging along the East Coast. I was wondering this morning. I think today might be the last 90-degree high. I mean, assuming that the pattern stays the way it is, which is with these troughs that keep wanting to drop into the eastern part of the United States. For some places, today might have been the last day that the hot temperature gets up to 90.
Well, it might. I'm thinking already about a few years ago when we had something like a couple of 90-degree days in early October. That's
right.
Doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, but you got to have a big ridge in the east to pull that off. I'm sure we'll have warm days. I'm just wondering, in a year where trying to string 2 or 3 days of 90-degree highs in the Northeast has been almost impossible to pull off. Timothy Veltman pointed this out. It almost feels like a more normalized atmosphere, a more normalized upper air pattern this season with regards to, and I mean the fact that we're getting these troughs that are coming down into the eastern part of the United States. I seem to remember that when we were younger, we would get, the 90-degree highs would basically shut off by the time we got to mid-August. There were years where it was prolonged, obviously, but you start to get these cooler air masses that would come down in August, and we may be setting up actually for a really nice cool air mass to come down after Friday. That may take us into next week with a nice big high building in eastern Canada.
You're absolutely right. And next weekend is the last weekend before Labor Day weekend, believe it or not.
Oh, I know, right? Summer's just about done.
Yeah, crazy.
Meanwhile, Hillary is gone. The moisture, I was sort of really intrigued by the fact that you could still see there's a flow of moisture because of the upper low that was off the west coast. The tropical moisture from Hillary streamed up from the subtropical Pacific over the Baja Peninsula and up the west coast, over the top into Montana, Dakotas, and spreading up into Minnesota and Wisconsin. It's just like this big conveyor belt, and you still could see remnants of that, although the rains in Southern California are done. And I do know, Joe, Palm Springs, annual rainfall in Palm Springs is 4 inches for the whole year. Okay,
right.
And they got 3.5 in probably about 6 or 8 hours.
Incredible.
Yeah, so they got a year's worth of rain, and of course here in the eastern part of the United States, 3 and 4 inch rainfalls are far more common from storm systems. So for them, it was really a standout performance. But fortunately, from the standpoint of flooding, I mean, there was considerable flooding. I know Palm Springs was a lot of Palm Springs was underwater. Parts of Nevada the same. But the fact that this system was ultimately moving at 30 miles an hour or more, really prevented. This was not something that was just going to sit down there and be trapped for days and days. The fact that it moved along at least was a blessing from that standpoint, because it prevented it from being far worse than what it was.
And a forecaster on MSNBC, and just so that in itself was unusual to see a meteorologist. I didn't even know they had on-camera meteorologists at MSNBC. They're always talking politics over there, but they did have a meteorologist today or this morning, and the meteorologist made the comment, I think it was to Jose Diaz-Balart, who has a show on MSNBC at 11 o'clock. He said, "Never in my entire career have I ever had to say something like this, but the remnants of a tropical storm, the moisture from that tropical system is now affecting and will be affecting Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, and western part of Montana."
Oh, you can see you see the rate on the radar. I mean, the rate from the remnant rains are up in Northern California now, well north of San Francisco, and they did get into Oregon and into Idaho and into Montana. In fact, yesterday the echoes were all connected all the way up into North Dakota. So this was a very impressive subtropical jet flow that set up, that carried Hillary up the coast the way it did. And by the way, it should also be noted that, yes, this was the first time a tropical storm warning was ever issued for Southern California. But bear in mind that tropical storm warnings uh, didn't exist back in the 70s. I'm trying to remember when they started with the tropical storm warnings. I think it was sometime well into the 80s when they instituted that. But they never used to put up tropical storm warnings. It was just hurricane warnings. So if you go back to Kathleen in 1976 in Southern California, which did a lot of damage and flooding in particularly around San Diego, that would have probably be an instance where they would have had tropical storm warnings. So,
Right.
just to put a little asterisk on the fact when they say, first time ever that tropical storm warnings were issued, well, there was a long stretch of time when tropical storm warnings didn't exist. Not much in the way of severe weather going on. You have marginal risks in the areas that are dealing with tropical systems in South Texas, from Arizona northward up into Montana, with some of the residual moisture that's out there. We've got a marginal risk for severe weather, and also a small area of marginal risk in northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Wisconsin. Otherwise, much of the east of the areas east of the Rockies, with a few small exceptions. Southern New England and southeastern New England because of this cold front coming through. But we just look at the radar. I don't think there's much of anything on there. I mean, there's just a few blips here. It looks like a little cluster of thunderstorms right now approaching Boston, but that really is about it. And the next couple of days from the Storm Prediction Center, they get to take a breather here after what was a busy first half of the month. Tomorrow, again, areas that have some tropical impacts in Texas, leftover tropical impacts in the monsoon for Utah, northwest Arizona into southwest Wyoming, and then just regular, old cold front, I guess, some sort of frontal system this is for Tuesday into Wednesday for northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula and parts of the lower peninsula where they have a marginal risk for severe weather. And on the next day, which is Wednesday into Thursday, you can see it's just general thunderstorms that are being indicated there. Leon Probitsky banged the tip jar, and thank you, Leon, most appreciated. And Ken Musillo actually hit super thanks, which you can do outside of the live show. If you're watching the show on tape, you can hit super thanks, and we would be super thankful. So yeah, he did. So just give Kenny a big shout out here. Thank you for hitting super thanks. And rainfall wise, Mr. Rayo. Now this is for Friday. This is for later Thursday and Friday in the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states, where we've got a half to 3/4 of an inch being indicated. And also you see the stripe that goes across South Texas for several inches or so into Mexico. And you see some active rain amounts in the central and southern Rockies and in parts of the Southwest and also in parts of the Pacific Northwest. But nothing crazy. We're not seeing 10 to 15 inches anywhere, which is good.
And that is good. I mean, just look what happened in July. Especially, I just went to Vermont. There was still, you could still see some evidence of all of those heavy rains that they went through last month. And then they had to get hit again on Friday morning with another round of, not tremendously heavy rains, but never seemed to want to end up there. So anybody who's been getting, lots of rain all this summer, it's nice now to finally get a bit of a break. The dew point, by the way, Joe, right now, still on the muggy side here in the immediate tri-state New York City area. But by tomorrow morning, that dew point will have taken a big drop downward. And these next couple of days, dew points in the New York area are probably going to be near 50 or maybe only in the 40s. So it's going to be most delightful these next couple of days as well.
We should also mention, by the way, in the middle of the country with that big upper high, we've got big heat going on. The entire Mississippi and Missouri River valleys, up and down, from Minnesota all the way down to Louisiana and Texas, all dealing with heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. And there's two shades of purple there, so let me see what the difference is. One is an excessive heat warning, And I guess the others are also red flag warnings. So a lot of these areas in the central and western Gulf have not gotten much, if any, rain in the last number of weeks, which is also another, when
Yeah.
you have a big upper high, you're going to have very little in the way of the usual summertime shower and thunderstorm activity. It's got to be bone dry there.
And that's sad because here we're hearing of places that get a whole year's worth of rain in less than a day, and you've got other places that have just simply sat like they were on a frying pan, and they haven't had anything for, as you just pointed out, Joe, more than a few weeks.
Helen Bertona just hit Super Chat. Thank you, Helen. Most appreciated. And Ken Musillo, who hit Super Thanks, also hit Super Chat. Thank you, Ken. Again, most appreciated. Now, I just want to, it's after 8 o'clock, which means if I try to pull up the max temperature map, it's going to, they reset it at 8 o'clock. So all the high temperatures during the day disappear. I mean, I can try it. Maybe that's not the case. But every time I've tried it after 8 o'clock, which is 0Z, so it zeroes out for the next day. So let's see if that's the case. And hopefully, because this was the map that was causing my... Oh, no, it didn't zero out. Glory, hallelujah. All right, so now we can at least look at some of the high temperatures. Let me put some counties on here. So you can see in eastern PA to southern New England, just a couple of 90s here and there. I mean, it was just nothing widespread at all. It looks like there was a 90 for a high in Newark. Come on, let me move the map. You're supposed to let me move the map. Okay, round and round it goes. Circle of death. Of course, Joe, they may have decided now. Oh, they didn't zero it out. Okay, so maybe now they're going to let me move the map. All right, is it going to move? Yes, it's being stubborn, but it is allowing me some movement, so we can at least see what the highs were, say, around Chicago. That would be nice to know. And of course, Joe, look, it stops at the Indiana-Illinois border. Nothing. It just stopped. No temperatures in Illinois. No temperatures in Iowa. I mean, these are the numbers I want to see. All right, here we go. So for tomorrow, anyway, they've got excessive heat warnings up for Chicago, but we can see some of the highs in Iowa today. There was a 101. Let's see where that was. The 101 was in Greenfield, Iowa. And then we head down into Kansas, where they were burning up. St. Joe's, Missouri, at 91. I'm sorry, 97. Dalby, 99 for a high. 101. No, that was Dalby. 101. Lawrence, Kansas, 104. Cute. Oh, 109. Manhattan, Kansas, Joe, got to 109. And I see 111 here. Let's see what this is. TRCOTA. I have no idea what that is. Okay, so it must be like one of these odd stations that they have. Here's another 10. Well, there was a 109. Hold on. 109. Concordia, Kansas, got to 109. I don't even know what that feels like. I can't imagine what that feels like. What's this 119 in Oklahoma? There's a 119 here in Oklahoma. Oh, no, now it disappeared, naturally. But you can see the bottom line, folks, is you see all the 100-degree highs going up and down from north to south, from the northern part of the Mississippi Valley all the way down through the southern plains to all of Oklahoma, temperatures all over 100. You get into Texas, same thing, 106. I guess that's Dallas. Fort Worth was 106, and Dallas was 104. So I guess somewhere in between those two, it was 105. And even down near the coast, I mean, Beaumont, Texas here, with a 100-degree reading nearby. Yeah, Beaumont, Port Arthur Airport, 100 degrees. I mean, they're right near the Gulf of Mexico, middle and upper 90s, right down along the immediate coast. That could not have been fun.
No. I can't stand heat. If I had to put up with the lesser of two evils, extreme heat or extreme cold, I probably would take the extreme cold. You give me extreme heat, I'm like a caged animal. I'd be pacing back and forth and rattling the cage, saying, I can't take this anymore.
Yes. By the way, we've got 65 likes and a nice size audience tonight. So Joe and I always love it when you get to 100 likes. It makes us feel so good about doing this show to know that 100 people like us. And thousands of others don't. But if you could hit the like button and get us to 100 likes, that would be great. And Steve hit super chat as well. Thank you, Steve. Most appreciated. And thank you for reminding me about the likes. So here's your big ridge. Your trough that drops down off the East Coast that brings down this shot of cooler, drier air that Joe mentioned for Tuesday and Wednesday. The trough lifts out. Another trough drops in the east late in the week. The upper high finally moves more toward the west, moves southwestward into New Mexico and West Texas. And you notice, you could see Franklin there getting wrapped up as a hurricane offshore, passing west of Bermuda and well east of North Carolina on this particular run because of troughing that's left over along the Appalachians, and it just sort of squeezes itself in between that and an upper low up in northern Labrador, and it kind of skims Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. And then as we go through time, in terms of the overall pattern, a ridge appears right at the beginning of a small ridge appears right at the beginning of a Labor Day weekend, which doesn't really last very long because some sort of upper low drops down into the upper Mississippi Valley and swings to the Great Lakes, and an even deeper trough comes into that right after Labor Day into the eastern part of the United States. That'd be nice to see if this were to verify. That would be a nice cool shot of air for the Northeast kiddies going back to school, because I think most of the Northeast goes back to school right after Labor Day.
Yeah. But I don't know about you, but it just seemed to me every time first day of school rolled around, it would always be raining. But that's just a memory of my mind.
I don't have any. Yeah, I don't know. Never thought about that. Well, I went to, I went to Catholic school all the way through, so all you could think about is whether you were going to get the evil nun. Anyhow, so here's your next high coming down from the northwest, right overhead. Makes for nice weather Tuesday and Wednesday. Low pressure comes out of the northern plains, pushes a warm front through here late Thursday with some showers and some thunderstorms. Then the cold front comes through on Friday and kind of hangs for a short time just to the east and then moves out. And then we've got this big high that builds into eastern Canada for Saturday, for Sunday, and it's still there for Monday. And you can see the GFS wanting to take Franklin offshore up the coast as a hurricane heading toward Nova Scotia. That remains to be seen. It's far enough in the long range, I think, that we'll be speculating about this over the next couple of days.
Right. Well, you remember, again, 5 days from now, the expectation from the Hurricane Center is that Franklin will be a hurricane, but whether or not that means that beyond that, anybody along the east coast of the U.S. or Atlantic Canada will have anything to be concerned about, forget about. That's way off and too far off in the future.
That it is. Okay, you know what time it is, Joe?
It's 8:29.
It's 8:29, and that means it's time for Briller Jeopardy. Yes, provided by Scott Briller. And a big hello to Mother Briller, who is recovering nicely. And that's good news. 81 likes. Just need 19 more. We may never go off the air unless we get 100. So tonight, Joe, let's see how much everybody knows about hurricanes. Okay. What were the 10 most powerful hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, measured by by lowest barometric pressure? Okay.
All right. Well, the one near the top of the list would have to be.
Well, let's let the chat board do this.
Okay. All right.
So we're looking for the 10 strongest hurricanes that in the Atlantic Basin. So I don't know whether it matters whether these hit land or not, but it looks like all of them did. But these are the 10 most powerful hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin based on barometric pressure. So let's see if how the chat board does.
Okay.
And we have, let's see. Sandy is a no, Christinapedia. Ike is a no, Jason Schaefer. Katrina, Christinapedia, is a yes. Katrina is number 7 on the list in 2005. Carol DeCara has Andrew, and that's a no. John Sachs 77, Joe, has Mitch. And Mitch is number 8 back in 1998. Let's see.
How about Hugo?
How about Hugo? No, Hugo is not on that list.
Really?
Yes, really. So folks are mentioning Andrew, Hugo, Laura, Matthew. Well, Mitch we got. Those are not on the list. Sandy, not on the list.
Chuck Cardillo, Northern Grace, Helen Bertone, all saying Camille.
Well, Camille, of course, number 6. For the longest time, for many years, Camille was number 1. But then, Alan came along and took that out. So I gave one of them away. So number 5 was Alan. Dorian, no. The problem is that over the last 20 or 30 years, we've had a lot of hurricanes that have gone down to the low 900, low 900s and even below 900. Number 1, Michael McGuire, Wilma, or Vilma. Keith James II also saying Vilma or Wilma. There's been no Hurricane Joe. Gloria is not on the list. David is not on the list. Suddenly my volume went low. Let's see. Hold
Joe,
on.
How about Gilbert?
How about Gilbert? Let's see. Gilbert. Yes, number 2 is Gilbert in 1988. Ian is not on there. I will tell you, folks, there is one unnamed hurricane on this list.
And I saw it on the chat board. And in fact, that was the one that I was going to lead off with. I said that's probably very near the top, if not at the top.
And that is?
The 1935 Labor Day storm?
That is number 3. Number 3.
That's 3?
Yes.
Wow.
So we haven't mentioned, we've got 1, 2, I think 4 of them here that have not been mentioned by anyone. Or if they were, I missed it. Bobby Rayo, why was it not named? That's because in 1935 they didn't name hurricanes. They didn't start that till 1953. I think it was 53. I think we had Hurricane Ethel in 53.
Ethel May Potter.
May Potter, we never forgot her. Not Belle, no. Small potatoes there. Not Isabel.
I mentioned this storm. Johnny Quest put it on the chat list. Frederick.
Not Frederick.
Not Frederick?
No,
okay.
Or in honor of young Frankenstein, not Frederick. Rita. Christinapedia got it. One of them. Rita in 2005. Rich Rothmansky, not Iota. Christinapedia, not Laura. And Matthew Howe gets another one that was that's on the list. Hurricane Dean in 2007 on there. No, the Halloween storm is not on there. Johnny Sachs. Not Fran or Francis.
Are we still looking for number 1?
We're still looking for no. We got number 1 was Vilma.
Oh,
so
Vilma.
let's recap what we have. Number 1 was Wilma in 2005. Gilbert in 1988. The Labor Day hurricane in 1935, number 3. Rita, number 4 in 2005. Alan in 1980, I mentioned that. Rita was number 4. Alan was number 5. Camille, number 6. Katrina in 2005. Mitch in 1998. Dean in 2007. And one more. And it was recent. It was 6 years to go, and it was one of two Category 5 hurricanes that year. I think it was just there were two. There were at least two. Uh,
How about Irma?
Irma's the other one, Joe. Owen Daniel got it though.
Maria, my daughter.
Maria in 2017. So that's the list, folks. Wilma Gilbert, the Labor Day storm. Rita Allen, Camille Katrina, Mitch, Dean, and Maria. We still only have 84 likes.
I have 85 on my list.
Well, I only got 84, and we were 1 hour and 1 minute into this show of ours.
Well, why don't we just ask nicely? If you haven't given us a like yet, and you know who you are, hit the like button. And within 30 seconds, we should be from 87 to 100. The numbers are climbing even as I speak.
Even as you speak, Joe. Your very breath causes people to like you.
Yes.
All right. While we're being liked, again, I mentioned this at the top of the show. So for those of you who tuned in the middle and are still watching, so our Sunday show has been at 11 a.m., but we are going to move it to 7:35, much like the other shows. So for those of you who are lurking in the background, quick welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show as we're slowly wrapping things up. Thanks for being here. If you like the show, subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on because we are going to be on now Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. Okay? And Joe, you want to mention who hit the super chat? Who hit super chat tonight?
Unless I missed somebody, we had Ken Musillo, Helen Bertona, Leon Probitsky, and Steve Lapointe.
I think you got them all. I think I got them all as they were coming out too. So hopefully, I see Steve Lapointe, Helen Bertona, Ken Musillo, and that's as far back as my chat board will go. Four more, folks. Just hit the 4 more likes for us, will you please? The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by our affiliate, Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. If you decide to purchase anything from the Tempest by Weatherflow website, use the coupon code I want a weather station, and if you do, you'll get
10% off. We're up to 98 now.
Okay.
Now we need just 2 more to reach 100 here.
All right. And brought to you by...
You'll still get 10% off, though.
Right. Exactly. You get 10%. Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town for all your hardware and landscaping needs. The website is...
OmniTrueValue.com. I thought for a second we were going to get 100.
Well, no, there's a Weisenheimer out there because it got to 96 and then somebody went to 95. It got to 98 and somebody unliked it to 97. Now we got to 100. And no other Weisenheimers out there.
Yes.
All right? We liked 101. So, give us a few safety likes.
102 now.
102. Okay, so I think we could say goodbye. Unless you got some kind of rant you want to do or...
No.
No, you're rant free?
I'm rant free. I'm gonna go up and have an Italian ice now.
Very good. Very good. All right, folks, really have a great night. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7:35. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.
Ugh.